What if I told you that every time you save a file, you are physically damaging the very device you trust to keep it safe? In the year 2024, we produced over zettabytes of data, a number so large it defies human comprehension, yet we store it on microscopic islands of silicon that are slowly committing suicide. Before you reach for that cheap thumb drive on your desk, you need to understand the beautiful, violent, and microscopic lie that the tech industry has sold you for the last 40 years. If you want to know how we moved from spinning metal to quantum prisons, and why your hardware is designed to fail, you are in the right place. Subscribe to this channel now, because the information I am about to give you is the only thing standing between your data and digital oblivion. The history of human knowledge has always been a history of violence and friction. For decades, if you wanted to record a sound or a moment in time, you had to physically scar something. Vinyl records required a diamond needle to aggressively scratch its way through plastic grooves, while cassette tapes relied on motors dragging miles of magnetic film across a metal head. Even the supposedly sophisticated compact discs of the 1990s were just spinning platters being hit by a laser, a mechanical dance that relied on thousands of moving parts. This was the era of moving media, a time when your music and movies were constantly fighting against the laws of physics. Friction is the enemy of permanence, leading to heat, wear, and the inevitable mechanical breakdown that turned your favorite albums into expensive coasters. This mechanical limitation created a desperate need for a silent, unmoving god of storage. The industry asked a provocative question: what if information could be stored without a single moving part? No motors, no spinning glass, and no physical contact. The answer required us to stop looking at the world of machines and start looking at the microscopic realm of quantum physics. This is the world of the solid state, where we manipulate the very building blocks of matter to hold our secrets. But as we stepped away from the friction of the physical world, we walked straight into a different kind of trap set by the giants of the silicon industry. Before flash memory arrived to save us, computing was stuck in a toxic relationship between volatility and permanence. You had your RAM, which was lightning fast but had the memory of a goldfish, because the moment the power cut out, everything vanished. On the other side, you had hard drives, those heavy blocks of spinning rust that could keep data for years but would die the moment you dropped your laptop. The tech industry needed a bridge. Something with the speed of a chip, but the stubbornness of a magnet. This set the stage for a breakthrough at the Toshiba laboratories in Japan during the 1980s. An engineer named Fujio Masuoka introduced a concept that would change everything, which he called flash memory. The name was not just a marketing gimmick. It referred to the ability to erase massive blocks of data in a sudden electrical flash. However, Masuoka was not treated like a hero by the corporate suits at Toshiba. In a classic move of corporate short-sightedness, they initially failed to see the value in his invention, allowing others to capitalize on the technology that would eventually kill the hard drive industry. This is a recurring theme in the world of tech, where the genius who breaks the laws of physics is often stepped over by the marketing departments who sell you the results. To understand why your USB drive works, you have to look at the microscopic prison cell Masuoka created, known as the floating gate transistor. Inside that tiny silver rectangle you plug into your computer lies a silicon graveyard containing billions of these microscopic switches. In a normal computer chip, transistors act like gates that open or close to let electricity pass through, representing a 1 or a 0. But the moment the juice is turned off, the gate loses its mind and forgets everything. The floating gate transistor is different because it adds a tiny, conductive island made of polysilicon. This island is completely surrounded by a thick layer of silicon dioxide, a perfect insulator. Because this island does not touch any other part of the circuit, it effectively floats in a sea of glass. Think of this floating gate as a microscopic prison cell designed to trap subatomic particles. When the cell is empty, the gate is considered off, representing a binary 1. When we want to store data, we have to force electrons into that prison. But here is the problem. The prison is surrounded by walls of glass that are physically impossible to cross according to the laws of classical physics. If the electrons cannot go through the wall, how does your resume get saved? This is where the tech companies stop being engineers and start playing God with quantum mechanics. They use a phenomenon called Fowler-Nordheim tunneling. When you save a file, the controller applies a massive electrical voltage to the chip, creating an intense field that screams at the electrons. Under this pressure, the electrons stop behaving like little balls of matter and start behaving like waves. They literally tunnel through the solid wall of the insulator, appearing on the other side inside the floating gate. Once the high voltage is removed, the electrons are trapped. They are stuck in a room with no doors, surrounded by an insulating barrier so strong that they will stay there for 10, 20, or even 50 years without any power. This is a quantum magic trick happening in your pocket every single day. But this magic comes with a hidden cost that the manufacturers would prefer you did not think about. Reading the data is the easy part, as the controller just sends a small gentle voltage to check on the prisoners. If the electrons are in the gate, their negative charge creates a field that blocks the current. The controller sees this blockage and says, that is a 0. If the gate is empty, the current flows freely, and the controller says, that is a 1. It is a perfect silent system, until you decide you want to delete something and write new data. This is where the victim, the user, gets caught in the villainous design of the flash industry. Erasing data requires the exact opposite of the writing process. You apply another burst of high voltage to suck the electrons back out through the glass wall. Imagine a person constantly running through a glass door. Eventually that door is going to shatter. Every time you write and erase data, those electrons tunneling through the silicon dioxide cause microscopic, atomic-scale damage to the crystal structure. Over time, the insulating wall becomes so scarred and leaky that it can no longer hold the electrons. The prisoners escape, the data disappears, and your drive becomes a brick. The tech companies knew this from the beginning. They knew they were selling you a product with a built-in death date. To hide this, they created a hidden hero called the flash controller. This is a tiny secret processor inside your USB drive that acts like a PR manager for a failing celebrity. It knows exactly which cells are dying, and it uses a technique called wear leveling to move your data around. It tries to spread the damage evenly across the billions of cells so that one area does not burn out before the others. When you think you are overwriting a file, the controller is actually lying to you. It is secretly writing the new data to a fresh, undamaged part of the chip and marking the old scarred part for later cleanup. In the early days, we used single-level cell technology, or SLC. Each transistor held exactly one bit of data, either a 1 or a 0. It was expensive, but it was reliable and could withstand 100,000 write cycles. But the villains in the corporate offices wanted higher margins and lower prices. They moved to multi-level cell, then triple-level cell, and now quad-level cell technology. Instead of just full or empty, they now measure the exact number of electrons in the gate to represent multiple bits. A TLC cell has to distinguish between 8 different levels of electrical charge. This allows them to cram massive amounts of data into a tiny space for a fraction of the cost. The trade-off is that these cells are incredibly fragile. Because the margins between the charge levels are so thin, it takes very little leakage to corrupt the data. While an old SLC drive was a tank, a modern QLC drive is more like a delicate glass sculpture. They sold us on capacity while sacrificing the very thing storage is supposed to provide: permanence. This is the practical lesson you must take away. Do not use cheap USB drives or low-end SSDs for your only copy of important family photos. They are designed for convenience, not for a lifetime. These devices are essentially digital scratch pads that are slowly wearing themselves out every time you use them. You must realize that in the world of solid-state storage, you are always in a race against time and physics. If you leave a USB drive in a drawer for 5 years, the trapped electrons can slowly leak out due to natural heat and background radiation. This is known as data rot. To protect yourself, you should treat flash storage as a transit medium, not an archive. Always follow the 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media, with 1 copy stored off-site. Your USB drive is a marvel of quantum engineering, but it is also a temporary prison for your memories. The transition from the era of moving media to the era of silicon was a trade of physical friction for quantum degradation. We replaced the spinning disk with the silent tunneling of subatomic particles. It is a triumph of human ingenuity that we can trap something as small as an electron inside a cage of glass to store a high-definition movie. But never forget that the tech companies profit from the fact that these cages are temporary. They have built a world where the very act of remembering also involves the process of forgetting. We have escaped the mechanical breakdown of the past, only to find ourselves managed by controllers and wear-leveling algorithms in a silent, microscopic war. So, the next time you plug in that drive, think about the billions of electrons being shoved through glass walls at your command. Think about the controller frantically shuffling data to keep the device alive for just one more year. And most importantly, make sure you have a backup. We have moved beyond the era of moving media, but the struggle against entropy remains the same. The laws of physics are not on your side, and neither are the manufacturers. Your data is precious, but the silicon it lives on is disposable. Take control of your digital legacy before the quantum walls finally give way. If you found this dive into the dark reality of your hardware useful, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Knowledge is the only thing that does not wear out with use, and we have a lot more to uncover together.